Hello, LEGO Transformers fans. This is Soundvox with LEGO Transformers Parts Forming. Now, what is parts forming? When I showed off my Seekers, I talked a lot about parts forming. But for the average fan that does not know much about Transformers, they might not be used to the term. So here we're going to discuss what parts forming is. I now have Dirge. This is a G1 replica. So it is one of the reissued series, and my wife got him for me on my birthday because when I did my Dirge video, I mentioned that I never had a Dirge, so now I have a Dirge. So what is parts forming? Well, let's take a look. If you look at Dirge right here, he is a great jet mode, right? This is a perfect looking jet. It's so awesome. These G1 jets really knew what to do with their style. They were great. So, what do we mean by parts forming? Well, parts forming means you take off parts or you add parts that are essential for the transformation. So, to transform Dirge, the first thing we have to do is take off this wheel. Now, some would say this is parts forming, but without the wheel, he does kind of lay flat. However, if you look at him, he is still a jet. So technically, that's technically not parts forming. You could call it parts forming, but it really isn't because it's not required. Now, we also have these guns, these cannons on his wings. We can take those off. Are they parts forming? You could say, well, he's not the same jet because he doesn't have his guns, but he is still a jet. You can clearly see he's this awesome looking jet. So I wouldn't call that parts forming either. So let's transform him. So to transform Dirge, we pull his nose cone down. We flip his head out. And it kind of bends like that so it can actually go through here. And so what we do is we then pop his arms out. And we send his head through his back. Pop down his feet. Rotate his wings. Flip his hands out. And bring his wings back. Now, one thing you will notice is something just does not look right with Dirge. Well, first of all, this is the instructions. It shows him like Starscream, but if we flip this up, now he looks more like Dirge. And now I gotta go even further back with my camera. I'll just go a little higher. But the funny thing is, we see he has no hands. No hands. Here's his hand. This does not fit anywhere on him in jet mode. So this is truly a part that you need separate from any mode. And his robot mode is not complete without his hands. So this would be parts forming. Parts forming is when you have to hook an additional part to the transformer in either robot or vehicle mode to complete that mode. And there we go. Now he has hands. Now we can add his guns back to him. Now the guns, I don't consider them parts forming either, because they're weapons. And the thing about weapons is they can go on in either mode depending on how they are. Many modes have storage for weapons in the newer Transformers. So I'm not worried about the weapons as parts forming. It's just those hands were clear parts forming. Now, in the actual instructions, it actually states to take off his wings and place them back on in the other direction. So you see his Decepticon symbols. Now, I don't like doing that because that's, once again, a form of parts forming. So whenever I transform him, I simply leave his wings on. And once they're in these little holes, they hold pretty good. So you could do things like flip them around, like if it was the other jets, I would just turn it around that way. But since it's Dirge, his jet mode is like this. So how does that translate to Lego? With my Dirge, I have these thrusters on his back. So I have to take his thrusters off to transform him. And then we bring his arms out, and we bring his wings forward, turn his little hands forwards. And then the thrusters, to make sure they're not wasted, I place them back on his arms, giving him kind of like arms. Now I do want to upgrade Dirge because I think he could look a lot better, especially how this Dirge has black accents on him. And I think it looks great. And so I would love my Dirge to incorporate those kind of features. So I will be making a new Dirge in the future. But the point of this, these parts were part of the jet, and they were part of the robot. So it is like parts forming, except for one small thing. True parts forming, the part has no place to go. So if I was to turn Transformer Dirge back into his jet, I have to pull his hands off. Turn back into jet mode. And we'll add his landing gear back in. Now you could say his landing gear was parts forming. However, his landing gear can store in his cockpit. That is an option. Forget how to do it exactly because it's kind of large. There we go. So now the landing gear is in the cockpit. And when he's flying, he won't have his landing gear out. So I wouldn't technically call that parts forming because there is a place for it. But did you notice something else? Let's put his guns back on. Here's what we noticed. I noticed it. I don't know if you all noticed it. Look, there's fists, little hands. Where do they go? It would be great if they could store underneath here, but they can't. They don't fit. They don't clip on. They don't stick in. Back in the G1 days, they were just trying to get these things to transform from vehicle to robot. So they didn't really have a way of actually putting parts in like they do in nowadays. So that is what we would call parts forming. It's when you take a part that is essential for one mode, either a vehicle mode or a robot mode, and you have to just store it somewhere. You just can't keep it anymore. You have to store it and then put it back on in the other mode. That's what parts forming is. So for my Lego Transformers, I try to avoid it where possible, but sometimes you just can't get certain details in Lego without taking a part off and putting it back on. So until next time, make sure to comment, share, and subscribe for more exciting Lego Transformers videos. Thanks for watching.